I could still work, and it wasn't that bad, but still, I knew it wasn't quite like it should be. And I started, as a teenager, I started with dairy intolerance. At the time when I went to see my girlfriend, and she served chocolate milk for snack, and a little later I had to run out the door and throw up. What was wrong? Well, we figured out dairy intolerance. So when we got married, I had an interest in this type of stuff. And there was somebody, David Walker was writing about doing research on whole grains, writing about whole grains. His theory was that a lot of our health problems are due to not having enough fiber in our food, because of making white flour, taking the bran out, taking the fiber out, discarding that. So we ended up getting a small mill to make our own flour. They were saying it should be made fresh so the oils don't go rancid. So we did that. We got a small mill. We started to buy wheat berries. And so that's how we've lived ever since we were married, using fresh grains. We were dairy farmers, so that meant we were eating our last meal before chore time in the evening. So 4 or 5 hours till we got to bed later. So it's got a very common thing for us to eat a bedtime snack. And what did we eat? Whole wheat, grape nuts, and milk from our dairy. And we were thinking, because we're using the whole wheat, we have a very healthy product, something that God made whole like it should be. So after a number of years of this, like I said, I was kind of dairy intolerant, not real bad. If I didn't use too much, it was okay. We tried to avoid chemicals in the garden. Then when our 2 oldest boys were about 13, 11 years old, they started with tooth decay. And we were so disappointed. My wife, about the same time, started to lose her good health that she had. Also, very disappointing. And our question was, what are we doing wrong? My wife was tired, didn't feel up to her work, now depression. And one of the things that we did ever since we were married, my wife always reduced the sugar in recipes when she did baking. And then about 2009, probably, we were introduced to a book called Devil in the Milk by Keith Woodford. Woodford was, somehow he got interested in the A2-A1 thing about milk. I'm going to show you the book. I got introduced to this book. It's called Devil in the Milk. And when I got this book, I was just, wow, quite a title. But I started to read in this book, and he did a lot of research on this issue about the A1 and the A2. Very, very interesting, in-depth study into it. And he was, when he started to research it, he was not based. He was looking for what is this issue about. So I ended up reading this book one day when my wife was away, spent all day reading this book, and the farther I read, the more I was captivated. The way I get it from him, what this A1, A2 is, I found this picture here somewhere in a book. I know you probably can't see it, but this is a picture of how the DNA has a pattern on it, and there's things happening in there in the body. The amino acids get pulled out of the blood and added to a chain of amino acids to build a protein. And the protein is built off the pattern in the DNA. So if the DNA changes, the protein can be changed. In other words, a milk protein is a chain of 209 amino acids hooked together, and it's very interesting to get into this stuff. How this was built. I mean, how God created this stuff. This chain is folded together, connected, different places, and the end result is a perfect protein. And they say we now have two different types of protein in our dairy milk, what they call the A1 and the A2 beta caseins. And the only difference is on that chain of 209 amino acids, there's one amino acid that is different in the A1 versus the A2. And the end result of that is that the amino acid, when you ingest milk, your stomach digests it. The thing that the stomach is supposed to do is break all these amino acids apart so that they can go through the gut wall into the stomach, into the body, and feed the body. So what happens they did a lot of research on this, and what they found was that the A1 beta casein, you end up with a peptide of 7 amino acids that stick at the spot where the one amino acid is wrong. So then somebody with a leaky gut, this peptide, it's called a peptide, if there's the amino acids still together, gets into the blood. And this peptide cannot feed the body in the blood like one single amino acid can. If this peptide gets in the blood, it's considered foreign, and the immune system has to take this peptide and take it out. It's no good in the body. It's clutter in the body, is what it is. The big question is, how much effect does that have on health? That is still a big question. A lot of research was done, different countries, how much A1 milk they have in their system, and the different health problems. They do link it together with heart disease and diabetes, first and foremost. Also some other. So after reading this book, I was, wow, is that what part of our dairy intolerance is about? So I was just, where do I start? I have a dairy. At that time, the stud companies, the AI companies were starting to test their bulls. So I asked my AI technician, and he was helpful with this. They had most of the bulls tested, and he helped me go through my herd, through my genetics, and I had A1 genetics. That's what I had in my barn. I had some that might have some had. It can be either A1, or A2, or A2. Every gene has two sides. So it can be both sides A1 or both sides A2, or it can be a combination. So what I found in my herd was mostly A1, A2 combinations. But I did find one cow that had an A2 sour. So I told my wife, I'm going to experiment on myself. So I separated this cow's milk out, and I drank a glass of her milk before going to bed. And that would normally have made bad breath, kind of upset stomach for me. And my wife was just, no, you don't want to do that. You'll have bad breath. But yeah, I want to do this. And that's what I did. And I felt fine on this milk. And this was surprising. I felt fine. The next evening I said, I'm going to drink 2 glasses of her milk before I go to bed. And it was the same story. So I was, wow. And about that same time, I had a 1-week-old calf that was sick. Scours just didn't really want to respond to treatment. How about giving this sick calf the same milk that the cow that had the A2 sour? So we switched that calf to that cow, and guess what? That calf The scours cleared up the next couple of days. I was just wow. Then we also got involved with a health meeting at that time. And yeah, they wanted me to tell about this. So yeah, anyway, with this A1, A2, I was convinced that there was something to this. And to kind of finish off on that, dairy farmers have this choice. Now all the stud companies test their bulls, and the dairy farmers all have this choice. They do have the choice of using A2-A2 steroids. And they say that if you use all A2-A2 steroids, normally a herd will probably be turned over to A2 in about 10 years. The A2s are available, but there's such a, just like we heard in the other session, there's always this 10% might go for it, 80% sitting back and waiting to see what happens, and 10% that they just want to blow it up, discard it somehow. And that's how it is with this A1A2. There was huge controversies over this because the company started up A2 Corporation, and then they were promoting A2 milk. We should be putting all A2 milk out, and the conventional companies were just trying to get them for false advertising, all kinds of stuff like that happened. But this has been quite a few years now, and it seems that has mostly quieted down. They say this A2 Corporation is one of the biggest companies in the world now. We don't know much of them in this country, but over in Australia, New Zealand, it's big. So after getting involved with these health meetings, it was monthly meetings, the question started to come up, if this is the problem with milk, this A1 gene, problem in milk, what's the problem with wheat? Maybe I should go back a little bit again. I guess we have that covered good enough of what the A2A1, what it actually is. So the question came up, what about wheat? We keep hearing this again and again. People go to a doctor, they're sick, they have chronic fatigue, this autoimmune stuff. The doctors tell them, get off of wheat and milk. You might be allergic to wheat or milk. Try it. And so many people, that's the answer to it for them, get off of wheat and milk. So the question just kept coming up. Why do we have to get off of wheat and milk? If this protein problem is a problem in milk, what is the problem in wheat? So we finally were introduced to a book by also have that one along, by William Davis. He's a heart doctor. It's called Wheat Belly. Anybody ever saw that? So this book was another eye-opener. This William Davis had seen thousands of patients, heart patients, and he had learned, somehow he figured out that if he tells his patients to get off of wheat, his diabetic patients, his heart disease patients, get off of wheat, that usually helps a lot of other problems. So his research, he finally got to the point where he felt that it's what has been done to wheat, the genetic changes that had been done to wheat. And he did an experiment with, he found some einkorn, made some bread with einkorn, ate that one day, checked his sugar, and his sugar went up to 110. The next day he tried to do the same thing, but used whole wheat. Checked his sugar, and it went up to 167. So yeah, just another one of those things that were very convincing that there might be something. But now the question is, what is the difference? the research shows that einkorn is probably the wheat as it was created. According to the genetic structure of it, genetic structures of other wheat, we think einkorn is the original. Einkorn has 14 chromosomes. Then what they think happened, they think einkorn was crossed with another grass, and the plant kept the genes from both sides, making a 28 chromosome plant. And that is what emmer is. Emmer is a 28 chromosome plant. And then they think somehow it was crossed again, the emmer plant was crossed again with another grass with 14 chromosomes, kept the genes on both sides, added it up to 42 chromosomes. And they say that is what spelt and modern wheat are. And the question is, how did that happen? Some of the evolutionists think this happened just by chance. I don't know, are the people in here familiar with how it works when genes combine? Is it plants, whatever? The pollen and the egg come together. I probably don't even use the right terms. And when this new plant starts, this new seed starts, we have two sets of chromosomes coming together. But the one set is, or half of the chromosomes should always be dropped. The new plant is still going to be a 14 chromosome plant, if the originals were 14. So how did this happen, that these plants combined it and kept the genes from both sides? But this is something that the plant breeders, it can be done with plants on very rare occasions. It happens that something doesn't go right and the genes combine instead of dropping. So then you end up with a plant that has twice as many genes. Evolutionists say this probably just happened by chance. But they tell us now, the plant breeders tell us, we can plant einkorn and modern wheat side by side, a 14 chromosome plant and a 42 chromosome plant. And there's hardly any chance at all that these plants will combine again. So, yeah, how did it happen? We don't know. I suspect it might have been done on purpose years ago, because plant breeders are now doing this, and they're doing it on purpose. The reason they want to combine genes like that and stack genes on top of genes is because it makes a bigger seed. The end result is a bigger seed, and that's what they're after. So what happens now if we do this? These genes combine. Genes produce the protein. The pattern in the gene makes the protein. Now what happens if these genes combine randomly? What kind of protein are we going to get out of this? This is kind of a hypothesis on our part. That is where these foreign proteins come out that the body cannot properly digest. And we think that A1 milk kind of shows us that can happen. The A1 milk, we have documentation of exactly where the different amino acid is and what happens with that different amino acid in there, the ones beside it stick. With wheat, we don't have that documentation. We don't know exactly what happens when all these genes got stacked up. But we do know that we have a protein. Gluten is a protein. We know that we have a protein in wheat that is very hard to digest. And with einkorn, we also have gluten in einkorn. On the other hand, most people can digest einkorn gluten. Most people that are gluten intolerant can tolerate einkorn, the gluten in einkorn. After we got started selling, we put a survey out to our customers. If you have gluten intolerance in your family, how do they tolerate einkorn? And the feedback we got was 88% tolerated good. 12% were not sure, and none of them said they do not tolerate it at all. Very interesting survey. And remember, Einkorn does have gluten. Our conclusion is that there is something different. The genetic structure, somehow, the protein structure is probably different because, yeah, people can digest Einkorn gluten where they can the modern gluten. And this has been a number of years now since we did this survey, but the feedback that we get since then is very consistent with those figures. So, just trying to think, is there anything I'm missing on that part? So back at the time that we found out about Einkorn, we were, now how do we get it? At that time, we were searching for Einkorn seed here in the U.S. and we couldn't find them. We finally found small packs of seed from California, and the seed company had. We got some of that, but it didn't. For some reason, it didn't set seed. It grew, but it didn't set seed. And we finally ended up getting connected with an organic research outfit from New York. The main lady that was involved in it was Elizabeth Dyke, and we finally ended up getting 6 cups of seed from her. She had taken Einkorn seed out of the seed bank. She did about 20-some different varieties, land races, planted it, just real small pots, and then she selected 6 that did well. This was in New York. And then she took the seed to Cornell University. They grew them out 1 year. And then they were ready to start to try to find farmers to grow. And they were giving seed out by the table, I think it might have been the teaspoonful. So what happens if you get a little bit of seed like that? Most people lose them. You plant a little plot, and it's so easy for something to happen with it. I know, just like the one farmer, he had a quarter of a cup of 3 different varieties. He planted it, he harvested it, added it in a bundle, set it back to dry, and then got back to the mine to on with it all. Yeah, so easy to lose it. I myself, we had the 6th cup, and we ended up harvesting it. And I was worried what could happen with it, so I put it inside my barn in the old wooden granary. Closed the doors. I thought it was drying up, and a couple days later I got back in, and it was sweating, and it was heating up. But we still saved it. We still saved the seed. So then it took 3 years. We started with 6 cups of seed. 3 years later, we had 14 acres of Einkorn. A good harvest that year. Looking for a market, there was literally no market for conventional Einkorn. We did not have our farm certified organic at that time. And we started to use it ourselves and sell it. And it's been a very interesting journey. We started to sell seed. Like I said, seed was not available in the United States. There was a couple of growers before us. But like so many times happens, people want to hang on to the seed, not let anybody else have it, just to protect their business. We started with this with the intention of growing our own, just for our family. Didn't really know where it's going to go, but after growing those first couple crops, starting to use it, I was just, this is too good not to allow. So we started to sell, just grew year by year, and it's very interesting how this keeps growing. We've sent seed to, I usually tell people we've sent seed to Maine, we've sent seed to Texas, to California, to Oregon, and a lot of states in between. It's mostly word of mouth. There's a couple mills here in Lancaster now. There's a mill in Ohio. And almost every year we're trying to buy enough Einkorn to hold us over till next year's harvest. This year, same thing again. We got a lot more acres out, but it's back to the same thing. They say they're almost out of Einkorn in Lancaster. Holmes County is asking where they can buy Einkorn. We had a good crop and we're good, but yeah, it just keeps going faster and faster. This winter, I looked into what we sold the last, how our sales went the last 4 years, and we had like a 260% increase from 4 years ago. And that is, again, with very little advertising. And one of the very interesting things that a lot of people, they like to use this Einkorn, but they struggle with making bread, nice bread with it. And one of the first things people want to make is bread. And one of the things that the starches change to sugar and the gluten quantity goes down. Next day it dries out again. Farmer harvests his grain. It just looks like it would without the rain. But you go to make bread with a lot of pink kernels. It did not look good at all. Then we switched to spelt. The spelt stays in the hole when you combine it, the same as Einkorn does. And that was much better. We could grow spelt year after year and have something decent. It appears to me that with these genes stacked in the modern wheat, it looks as if it actually weakens the plant. It seems to be more susceptible to diseases than what the spelt and the Einkorn are. With the Einkorn, the last years, we've been having year after year of nice rain. The only problem is that we have a lot of rain right before harvest. It's so amazing to me. When we started with this grain, people were saying that you can't make bread with it. You can't grow that stuff here in our country. Yield's going to be almost nothing, and it did not turn out that way. We were expecting 20 to 30 bushels per acre, and our top yield is 90. 90 bushels is 30 pounds per bushel. It's so interesting to me that this old seed, that we can grow it here, sustainable, year after year, save our seed, and have a very good quality product. We can make bread with it. The varieties that we had did not make a very nice bread unless the conditions were almost perfect. But we just started with another variety a couple years ago. We had our first 3.5 acres of that this last summer. And with that, we can now make a very, very nice bread with it. Is the yield going to be quite as much with that one? We don't know for sure yet. We have more out this coming year. What we like to do when we clean seed, we just use a common seed cleaner. The seed cleaner is you put a screen underneath that has holes in to let the wheat seed drop out. You have to size the holes right for the right crop. So what we do is we put a screen underneath that has 3/16-inch holes, and that lets any grain that is already dehulled drop out, plus the wheat seeds. It lets the smallest seeds drop out. So we're saving our bigger seed, and we're having very good luck like that. 1 year after the next, just keeps seeding the same. Then one of the big things with Einkorn was Einkorn does not thresh out of the hole from combining or from the threshing machine. It stays in the hole, same as oats or barley or spelt. So how do we dehull this? We have to take the holes off. And this equipment was almost non-existent in the United States. There's a very good dehuller from Germany called the Horn. Does a very good job with Einkorn and spelt, but these dehullers cost like $50,000. So how does a small farmer wanting to start growing einkorn, selling, how does he get started? They say even the deholder costs $50,000, but there you have it. The electricity change to US hooked up, you're looking at quite a bit more than that. So one thing after the other. I mean, now we had the crop, and we needed a way of deholding and milling. So finally, a guy from Pittsburgh, Nigel Tudor, ended up doing a design similar to the horn, slightly smaller scale, and he put it online for anybody to use. So we finally ended up using his design, building a deholder for ourselves, and of course this kept going. Somebody else wanted one, somebody else wanted one, till we finally got to the point where we actually started to make deholders and mills to do small-scale milling and deholding. But the deholding is kind of the bottleneck with einkorn. The holes have to be taken off, and what we use a machine that's similar to a hammer mill. But then we use a woven wire screen instead of your normal screen with holes in it. And you have to run it slow enough that you want a fair amount of grain in there, and it's just rubbing the grain in there on the woven wire screen, and it peels the holes off from that rubbing in there. We can never do it 100% the first time through. We can get like 94, 95% dehold the first time through. Then we have to run it through a cleaner to separate the ones that are not dehold from the ones that are dehold. Then we rerun the ones that don't dehold the first time through. So the end result was that, yes, we did finally find a system. The deholders as we make them now are a couple $1,000. It takes a cleaner, and we can actually use an open wood chipper cleaner. And then it takes a dust collector fan, it takes augers to feed the deholder. So yes, it is possible to do a simple system. Somebody that's mechanically inclined can actually take an old, buy a hammer mill at a sale, and use a hammer mill and change it to a deholder. So there's ways of doing it. And then the other thing was milling, but milling is not as hard because there's small electric mill, high-speed electric mills out. Nutrimill, Wonder Mill are both very good. They're small, slow, and then if you want to upgrade from that to a bigger volume, you can always use hammer mill for making flour. I think I should talk a little bit on what we hope to see from switching to this Einkorn, switching to A2 milk, and what we actually did see. We were actually hoping for more than what we got. There was a lot of talk about the milk, the A1 milk being a factor in mental illness. And I think it might be on a small scale. So we switched our diet to A2 milk and Einkorn. And what happened? We have quite a few young families doing the same thing. They're using A2 milk instead of they're making sure they're using A2 milk, and they're using Einkorn instead of wheat. My wife mostly got her health back. We never did a lot of doctoring. Changed our diet, and gradually, it got better. I can't say that our youngest children don't have tooth decay. For one thing, my wife, till the youngest were born, she didn't have any milk for them, so they went on formula or A2 milk, yogurt, stuff like that. So they did have some tooth decay. But now, like my oldest boy, 3 grandchildren now. The oldest one's 4, and perfect teeth. I still think it's going to make a difference if we do this generation after generation. It's so hard to pinpoint. Like William Davis writer of the Wheat Belly, he was talking about wheat. He thinks change to einkorn would help a lot of health issues. This Keith Williams or Woodford with the milk, same thing. He thinks the milk's going to make a big difference. Combine these. It's one of the, I always say it's one of the easiest things you can do for your health. Einkorn does cost a little bit more because the yield is less. But milk, all you have to do is either buy your own A2 cow, find a dairy that has A2 milk, and you can completely get away from those bad proteins. I did find out from researching this that a lot of our crops that we grow are actually stacked genes. Oats, rice, most of the rice grown across the world now is stacked genes. Years ago, it was not. They've been trying to do it with corn, but they can't. They cannot stack. Corn is a diploid. Even the modern GMO hybrid corns are a diploid. Einkorn is a diploid. That's what I don't think I gave the names of that. A diploid, we are diploids. A diploid is one set of genes. We think as God created it. A tetraploid has two sets of genes in it. And then the modern wheat, hexaploid, has three sets of genes in it. So they're, with corn, they just could not get that to a tetraploid. And I'm thankful that they couldn't. But still, they found a way of splicing in other genes. So what happens if they put this other gene in? What kind of protein are we going to get out of it? If we think about GMOs, we come back to the same subject. We're messing with the genes, and we don't know if that protein is going to come out in a way that the human body can properly digest it. So yeah, we were hoping we could see a big difference in like schizophrenia patients, bipolar, and it seems to me as if the damage is done when they're young. And is all the damage from the milk and the wheat? Probably not. There's glyphosate, there's all kinds of things that are being done now that are not good. But it still seems to me, from seeing the younger generation come now, the young families that are using Einkorn and A2 milk, I keep seeing this again and again. We know how so many ladies put on weight after having one or two children. And I don't know of anybody that's using Einkorn and A2 milk where that's the case. A young lady had a couple of children and her weight increased a whole lot. And the children that we're seeing from that, I'm very excited. We're seeing very healthy, bright-eyed children coming from doing that. But there's anybody that's going to use Einkorn and A2 milk is also probably going to try to avoid glyphosate, probably going to try to use less sugar. So yes, we don't really have any controlled studies that really proves exactly how far it's going to go. But it's very interesting to me because I think I see a big improvement. But yeah, it could very easily be said that I have reason to be based because I'm selling Einkorn. I'm in the business. So yeah, we have 10 minutes left now. Questions? I can usually talk all day about this, but in a setting like this, questions would keep me going, but probably without questions I won't get too far.
Well, we can assume that milk was created perfect. AK2. How did it turn into A1 at some point?
The milk, we do not know. There's people that want to claim God created those proteins. But Woodford came to the conclusion that it is a mutation. And I tend to believe that it's a mutation. He did a lot of research on he said human, a lot of other animals have the A2 proteins. This dairy protein A1 is different.
So in other words, usually other animals besides cows are A2.
Yes.
So
We don't know any other that has A1.
could it be
Has the same amino acid structure as the A1 milk.
when the dairy industry pushing so hard for high production that somehow they
We just don't know.
Do you see a difference in wheat that's combined or shocked?
I know there's a lot of talk about that, but if it's combined, there's so many factors involved here. The reason they want to claim it's different is because the shock would go through a sweat. But I've shocked and threshed for years now, and it's not all the same. 1 year we have dry, we put it on a shock, it never sweats. We thresh, we put it in, it's dry, it doesn't go through a sweat in the field or in the bin. The combine, it can happen the same way. In combine, it can happen that you have a little bit of moisture, you put it in the bin, it sweats in the bin. I just can't really see where one is so much superior to the other. But we did find now, just this last year, one of my growers took his off early. It was still kind of green on the bottom, took it off, shocked it, capped it, and had very nice drying weather. Got it dry, and that Einkorn made beautiful bread. Extra so, and we think because it was taken off early, dried quickly, the gluten quality is lost from getting moisture, drying again, getting more moisture. And that can happen even from dew if it's out long enough. Do you all have a question?
And microbiome is interesting to me, our gut and stuff. And I'm learning that greens, vegetables, the more variety you have, the more things you have to feed your gut. Like, not just sticking with one green,
Yeah.
but they have many. Like, one spinach seed will have 50 different feeders. I don't know what they call it, but they feed your microbiome. And then it multiplies, and you have a healthier gut.
And the healthier your gut is,
The healthier you are in it.
the less of these peptides will get through into your blood. Somebody with a very healthy gut, tight, and doesn't let it through till it's broken down, you won't get these peptides in the blood. And it can be the same thing with your brain-blood barrier. If that's good enough, it doesn't let these peptides get in the brain. And that is a very interesting part of the story. What I don't know is, can a gut be healthy enough to actually break the A1 proteins apart? I don't know about that.
That is all three right.
Yeah.
Question over here on this side.
Yes.
I'm not sure how to say it, but we hear a lot about the gut, like our meat creates this leaky gut, and that creates a mental issue. Can it also work the other way that, let's just use, for example, a negative attitude toward life in general? Can that cause a leaky gut? I'm not asking for an answer.
Yeah, I really don't know. You would think it could be a factor, but that Woodford, the guy that wrote Devil in the Milk, he says that the claim is that the modern wheat opens the gut up. Something about the modern wheat, it just opens it up, makes it more porous.
You mean make leaky gut?
Yes, and Woodford says use wheat, come in with the A1 milk proteins. It just it just opens it up to let them into the gut. So it seems as if it's just a combination of the two. And I always just have to think, a combination of two things that the genes are not like they were created.
Another question in the back.
Yes.
Thank you for the insightful presentation. A quick question about the cattle breeds, the dairy cattle. Can you make the distinction, or is there a distinction made with A2, A1 with all dairy breeds, or is it just specifically like Holsteins or Jerseys or?
You can test all the different breeds. You can pull hair samples and send them to a lab and have it tested. Yeah, the Holsteins, 10 years ago when we started getting this information, the Holsteins were like 80% A1. The Jerseys were like I think 48%. Guernseys were like 20% A1. I think now if you look through a Holstein stud book, it's not 20% anymore. They know it. I always felt they know it's coming, and there's no reason not to select for A2 genes, because there's a lot of good Holstein A2 genes out there.
Thank you.
What makes it be A2, A1, or whatever? Why is this sometimes a combination of A1 and A2? Just so one bull with one thing, the cow with another?
All mammals have two sets of genes, and we're talking one can be A1 and the other can be A2. So it's if you have an A2 cow, you use a bull, A1 A2, you can get either one, but you won't get an A1 You can have an A2 come out of that cross, or an A1 A2, but you won't get an A1
Never A1.
Not if the bull or the cow or the.
But there are cows that are A1.
Yes. If you have A1 on both sides of the gene, you can end up with A1.
So at least if A2 is half of it, like A2, A1, it's still better than A1.
We don't know exactly how the milk compares. If it's combination gene, we don't know if some of that milk is good, or I myself don't know. Woodford, his book, he doesn't have exact answers on that.
We have time for one more question over here. Mel, go ahead.
I'll ask them later.
Okay, then over here, who had your hand? Go ahead.
You spoke a little bit about sustainable farming, and so thinking globally, or in war context,
Yeah.
how is something like this? How could that be utilized? Or
The Einkorn it doesn't take much input. We would never put fertilizer on Einkorn. A little bit of manure, very low input, and that would be an advantage. The thing is to people. But it doesn't take that much, but it does take power. So yeah, maybe we should be in the other room listening to how to make gas.